some ideas on how to help at your agency. This will be recorded so that we hope we can have it available for all agencies on our website. And that way, if people aren't able to call in today, that won't be a problem. They can listen in at a later time. There will be, at the very end, like I mentioned, some Q&A time. And at that time, I will also, again, ask you to put in your name and agency number so that you can get credit for coming to this webinar. All right. So Harvester's mission statement is feeding hungry people today and working to end hunger tomorrow. So that's been our mission statement for quite some time, and we've, as Steve Davis likes to say, we've done the first part of our mission statement really well for a long time, and we're really trying to look at what does that second part look like, the working to end hunger tomorrow. So that's going to look a lot of ways, and we're still kind of evolving and figuring out what that could look like. And this webinar and some other things along the way are going to be a part of that. One of the things we're definitely focusing on is a better focus on nutrition as a way to help work to end hunger tomorrow, and we're going to talk a little bit about that today. So for those of you who have the printout of the PDF, I will attempt to tell you what page we're on. For those who are on the webinar, you can just follow along, but we are on slide 3, and it's got the 2 maps right now. So one of the CDC's Healthy People 2020 goals is to reduce the disease burden of diabetes and improve the quality of life for all persons who have or are at risk for diabetes. And so, as you can see, there's a map from 1994, and then there's a map of the U.S. in 2015. And the little legend at the bottom kind of shows how the prevalence of diagnosed diabetes, which is an important word, diagnosed, has grown in the past 20-some years. We are red in Missouri and orange in Kansas, and so those are toward the higher ends of the prevalence of diagnosed diabetes in the U.S. So one of the questions I want to pose to you all while we're going through this is, what role can we as food pantries and kitchens play in slowing some of this chronic disease in our own country and our own communities? So the next slide for those of you on the looking through your PDFs. So in Harvester's 26 county service area, every 4 years we have done the Feeding America Hunger in America study. So in 2014 was the very first time they asked questions about health. So previously we've asked a lot of questions about demographics, about understanding who the clients are. In 2014 we asked a lot of health related questions. And so we're going to look at what are some of those results. So slide 5 talks about some of the hunger findings. These are very specific to harvesters. So this is going on in just our 26 county area. So we recognize over on the bottom left that 62% of our households have at least one member with a high blood pressure. And on the right, we recognize that 37% of our households have at least one member with diabetes. These are slightly higher than the national average for our demographic. We also know that at this point in time, 62% of people had to choose between food and medical care. So that could be that they are uninsured, or it could be that they're underinsured with not enough care to cover all of their medical expenses. And so that is something that they certainly face when they're coming into our pantries and kitchens. And so now we are understanding a lot more about the intersections of hunger and health. We at Harvesters and in Feeding America are looking at some innovative opportunities to help out. If you guys can hold on just 1 second, we're having technical difficulties. Okay, so I am hoping that now everybody is able to see the screen that we're actually on, which has a picture of Hunger in America Report Health Findings 2014, and it has some stats about high blood pressure and diabetes. Is everybody able to see that now? Sorry about that. Yes. All right, we're getting some positive feedback. I am so sorry about that. Okay.
Yes, we see.
All right, good deal. Um, So, if we know this about our clientele, I know that a lot of folks, working and volunteering at pantries could have said some of these things anecdotally, but now we actually have some strong information, so that's what we're working from. So, if we know this about our service area's clientele, what does it tell us about our role or our possible role? And can these numbers, can it help inform the food that we have available to our guests? All right, hopefully it progressed to the next screen. The Hunger in America Report coping mechanisms. So some of these are helpful coping mechanisms like gardening, while others can actually harm our guests, like purchasing unhealthy food or watering down food or drinks, and thus they're going to be receiving fewer nutrients. So while we understand that distributing food is the first step in helping food insecurity, it is not the last step. Sometimes the food we distribute can counteract some of the medications they are taking. Many times food is necessary in order to take some medicine. So for many of our guests, food insecurity is just one manifestation of other issues in their lives. Many times they're also facing housing crises, educational barriers, or underemployment. And again, 62% of our guests report having medical debt. So if we can change just a little of what we have to offer or how we support our guests, we can be a part of the second part of Harvester's mission statement of working to end hunger tomorrow by relieving some medical debts or time missed at work because of illness, as we can have healthier guests who can better manage their diseases. So we can help stop the cycle of food insecurity and compromised health, which can then lead to increased medical costs, which can then contribute to poverty and food insecurity. So if you go back to this other slide, for those of you who are looking at the printout, it's very cyclical. So if they have diabetes, that's going to cause increased medicinal costs as well as potentially days lost at work. And so that could exacerbate their poverty and their food insecurity. So if we're potentially able to offer healthier solutions to our guests, then that could potentially help them become contributing citizens in different ways. So we definitely want to acknowledge that any calorie are better than no calories for a short amount of time. However, calorie-dense, nutrient-deficient foods can be harmful over the long term. Many of our pantry and kitchen guests are now returning for longer durations, and many food banks, kitchens, and pantries are looking at the long-term effects that may have on their guests. So if guests do not have healthy foods available to choose when they visit us, they cannot choose them. Many of our guests' neighborhoods are in food deserts with few, if any, healthful items for purchase as well. So can we offer additional ways to bring healthier foods to our pantries and kitchens so that guests can have that choice that we have when we are at the grocery stores? Can we remove some barriers to them helping choose these foods, like taste tests and recipes, so that people know how to prepare these items in a healthful manner? And those are just some questions that I want to pose to you, and I know that the answer is going to be different in a lot of settings. So here's what some of our guests are asking for more of from the hunger study. So we know that 52% of our guests want fresh fruits and vegetables. 48% of our guests are wanting more protein food items like meats. And 47% of our guests are asking for more dairy products. Again, this was in 2014. And Harvesters has put a lot of different things in place to try and help that in the past couple of years. We also recognize that this can be tricky because of lack of refrigeration, the frequency of days or hours that you are open, or the number of guests that you're serving. So we are working to increase access to dairy as well as produce. We can also potentially help with writing grants for some equipment. We are happy to write letters of support. We're willing to offer helpful language for grants and things of that nature. So now is when I'm going to turn this over to my colleague Charlene Wallace from the American Diabetes Association. She's going to talk more about diabetes, and then I'm going to come back and discuss ideas that can be implemented at pantries and kitchen settings. So welcome, Charlize.
Hello, this is Charlene Wallace, and I am a Regional Director of Community Health Strategies for the American Diabetes Association. And we are really excited to be working with harvesters and all of their partnering agencies to best help people affected by diabetes get the nutrition that they need to manage and prevent diabetes. So today, I'd like to talk with you a little bit about diabetes, the burdens, and how it affects our bodies. So, diabetes is a growing epidemic with devastating physical, emotional, and financial toll on our country. In 2015, 1 in 11, which is also 30.3 million Americans, have diabetes. Of those who have diabetes, 23.8% of them are undiagnosed and may not know that they have it. An estimate of 33% of U.S. adults over 18 have prediabetes. That is 84.1 million Americans. And nearly half of the adults age 65 or older have prediabetes. Of those with prediabetes, almost 90% of them don't even know that they have it. Prediabetes is also up from 79 million in 2010 to where we are now. So this is definitely a major growing epidemic and something that we as a country need to be aware of, that we are going to be facing. So not only is diabetes affecting our health, it's also affecting our pocketbooks. In 2012, 1 in 5 healthcare dollars spent in the United States were spent to care for people with diabetes. In fact, the total direct and indirect estimated cost of diagnosed diabetes in the United States was $245 billion, and that's a billion with a B. In addition, the average medical expenditures among people diagnosed with diabetes is 2.3 times higher than the expenditure for people without diabetes. So now I'm going to move in and give you a little background on what diabetes is, just kind of some basics on diabetes, so everybody can make sure that they're on the same page. So, what is diabetes? Diabetes is a disease that occurs when your blood glucose, also called blood sugar, is too high. But we can't just get rid of all of the blood glucose in your body because you need it to have energy to walk, talk, think, move, everything else that you do throughout your day. Blood glucose is the main source of energy and comes from the food that you eat. So let's look at how the process works for someone without diabetes. Okay, so you sit down and eat your lunch. The food goes into your stomach, and when it's digested, the glucose is pulled out of that food and put into the bloodstream. Once the glucose is released into the bloodstream, the pancreas says, hey, there's blood glucose out there, and it says it's time for it to release some insulin. So the insulin, which is a hormone, works like a key to let the glucose into the cells. So we use the insulin to unlock the cells and allow the glucose in. Once the glucose is inside the cells, then the cells can use it for energy. Diabetes occurs when there is a breakdown in this process. So as you can see, it's really important to make sure that we obviously have glucose in our blood so that we have energy, but we have to make sure that it stays at manageable levels and make sure that this entire process works the way that it's supposed to. So I'm going to briefly touch on the different types of diabetes. So in general, there are four main types of diabetes. So type 1, also used to be called juvenile diabetes, is basically when the body doesn't make insulin. People who have type 1 diabetes have to receive insulin either through shots or through a pump. Type 2 is the most common type of diabetes, and it accounts for approximately 95% of people who have diabetes. And basically what this is where insulin is not used properly. It's also, people are also considered to be insulin resistant when they have type 2 diabetes. Prediabetes is the third one. And basically what prediabetes is when you have an elevated blood glucose, so there's extra glucose running around in your veins, but it's not quite high enough to be considered type 2 diabetes. However, it can lead to type 2 diabetes. And then the final one is gestational diabetes, and this develops in pregnant women. Generally, women who develop gestational diabetes, this diabetes goes away once the baby is born. However, it does put them at increased risk for diabetes, for type 2 diabetes in the future. So, just to give a little bit more information about each of these types. So if you have type 1 diabetes, your body doesn't make insulin. Your immune system attacks and destroys cells in your pancreas that make the insulin. So type 1 diabetes is usually diagnosed in children, which is why it was called juvenile diabetes for a long time. So children and young adults, although it can appear at any age. People with type 1 diabetes need to take insulin every day to be able to stay alive. People with type 1 diabetes can take their insulin, again, either by injection with a syringe, an insulin pen, or an insulin pump. Insulin does not come in a pill form, and without the insulin, your blood glucose could rise higher and higher, which can lead to hyperglycemia. So to look at treatment for type 1 diabetes, again, when you have type 1 diabetes, you must monitor your blood glucose levels and appropriately administer your insulin to keep your blood glucose levels within safe ranges, like we had kind of discussed before. Nutrition is another very big cog in this wheel to make everything work. And keep people healthy that have type 1. So nutrition is one of the most important pieces of the diabetes puzzle. Understanding how different foods affect your blood glucose and learning how to develop a solid meal plan is a crucial part of the routine. And it helps you determine how much insulin your body needs. People who are only able to obtain calorie-dense and nutrition-deficient food find it very difficult to maintain safe levels of blood glucose, and having uncontrolled levels or levels that fluctuate dramatically will experience more complications and health problems. And then exercise is the third component. Exercise is also a key to the puzzle in the proper care of diabetes, along with the other benefits of being active. Diabetes will respond in kind with more stable blood glucose levels. For people with type 1 diabetes, it's very important to balance your insulin doses with the food that you eat and the activity that you do, even if it's things like housework and yard work and things like that. So planning ahead is extremely important. So moving into type 2 diabetes. In type 2 diabetes, your body does not use insulin properly. This is called insulin resistance. At first, the pancreas is able to make extra insulin to make up for that. But over time, your pancreas isn't able to keep up and can't make enough insulin to keep your blood glucose levels in a normal range. When blood glucose levels build up in the blood, instead of going into the cells, it causes two problems. First, right away, your cells may be starved for energy. Again, that glucose inside the cells is the piece that actually gives us energy and allows us to do the things that we do every day. And then over time, blood glucose levels can hurt different parts within your health, including hurting your eyes, your kidneys, and your nerves, as well as your heart. So symptoms of type 2 diabetes includes frequent urination, excessive thirst, unexplained weight loss, extreme hunger, sudden vision changes, tingling or numbness in your hands and feet, feeling tired much of the time, dry skin, sores that won't heal, and more infections than usual. And again, as a reminder, almost 24% of people with diabetes don't even know that they have it. So looking at the treatment for type 2 diabetes, again, we have a lot of the same puzzle pieces here that we had with type 1. Frequently, with people who have type 2 diabetes, they may require medication. Generally, this is an oral medication. Sometimes it's insulin and sometimes it's both. However, that healthy nutrition, making sure that they have access to healthy fruits and vegetables, and things for them to be able to manage their blood glucose levels is extremely important, along with being able to take their blood sugar on a regular basis so they know where their levels are. Exercise is also important because exercise also does a great job of helping cells take in the glucose that they need to survive and give that energy. So people with diabetes must take responsibility for their day-to-day care and keep blood glucose levels from going either too low or too high. So let's talk a little bit about risk factors. So now, this, of course, is very similar to a lot of the chronic diseases that are out there. However, smoking is a major risk factor for type 2 diabetes, as well as being overweight and obese. Family history is also a major risk factor. And although it is a major risk factor, just because someone has several family members with diabetes doesn't mean that you should just throw up your hands and say, oh, well, there's nothing I can do about it then, because there is. You do have a way that you can help manage your diabetes and prevent diabetes. So just because you have a family history, it's still important to make sure that you're working to manage your blood glucose levels. Physical inactivity is another risk factor, along with high blood pressure, and race and ethnicity is also another one. So some races and ethnic groups have higher risk factors. Of those, that includes African Americans are 1.7 times more likely to have diabetes than non-Hispanic whites. American Indians and Alaska Natives are 2.2 times more likely to have diabetes than non-Hispanic whites, and Hispanic adults are 1.6 times more likely to have diabetes than non-Hispanic whites. So let's talk about prediabetes. On this side, you can see that we have a breakdown of the ranges related to diabetes. Looking at these ranges, an A1C test is a blood test that is a measurement of your blood glucose and helps determine who is diagnosed with diabetes. So if you have an A1C test that is 5.6 or less, then you're in the normal range and you do not have diabetes. If your A1C is between 5.7 and 6.4, that is within the prediabetes range. And then 6.5 and above is the diabetes range. So prediabetes is where blood glucose is higher than normal. And it's really important for us to also know that 9 out of 10 people who have prediabetes don't even know that they have it. And the great piece about prediabetes is the fact that this gives you an opportunity to take action and do things to help avoid getting diabetes. And taking this action can actually reduce your risk by half. So don't let the pre and prediabetes fool you into thinking that it's really not a problem right now. I'm okay. It's not diabetes yet, right? So this gives you an opportunity to take action right away to help prevent prediabetes from becoming type 2 diabetes. You can also reduce the risk of heart attack and stroke associated with prediabetes. Many people with prediabetes do not change their lives. Many people with prediabetes who do not change their lifestyle by losing weight, if that's needed, and being more physically active will develop type 2 diabetes within 5 years. In fact, our infographic here shows that 15 to 30% of people will develop type 2 diabetes within 5 years if they do not take action. So, and then of course, type 2 diabetes can lead to serious health issues like heart attack, stroke, blindness, kidney failure, loss of toes, feet, or legs. So in addition, some of the risk factors for type 2 diabetes, like being overweight and not physically active, can make you feel sluggish and affect your mood. So a positive lifestyle change will not only lower your risk for your risk of prediabetes for type 2 diabetes, they can improve your overall well-being and the well-being of your family. So, and then our fourth piece is our gestational diabetes. Pregnant women who have never had diabetes before, but who have high blood glucose during pregnancy are said to have gestational diabetes. It starts when the body is not able to make and use all the insulin it needs in pregnancy. Without enough insulin, glucose cannot leave the blood and can be changed into energy. So the glucose builds up within the blood in high levels. Untreated or poorly controlled gestational diabetes can hurt the baby. Glucose from the mother can be transferred to the baby, and all of the extra glucose gets stored in the baby as fat. It can put the baby at risk for obesity and type 2 diabetes later on in their life. So now that we know a little bit about the different types of diabetes, let's talk a little bit about how to prevent and manage diabetes. So there are truly three pieces to the puzzle, and we've kind of talked about this a couple of times, but nutrition is a huge factor in this, as well as making sure that people are being compliant in medication, their insulin, and checking their blood glucose. And physical activity also plays a major part in helping people manage their diabetes and be healthy as they move through their life. So one of the things that we utilize at the American Diabetes Association is the diabetes plate. And we really like this because with all the information out there of you have to eat this or eat that, or, this is how you, cure diabetes, or, whatever, because there's all sorts of information out there. The diabetes plate is a really simple way for people to kind of, at a glance, see how well they're eating. So with the diabetes plate, basically we look at your plate, cutting it in half, with half of the plate being non-starchy vegetables, being able to fill that plate with all kinds of different things there in the non-starchy vegetable. Another quarter of the plate being healthy whole grains or starchy vegetables, and the other quarter being protein. It's a really good opportunity for people to be able to see if they are eating healthy or not and be able to look at it at a glance. And then we also talk about adding fruit as a side, and then water or other non-calorie drinks to be able to utilize. So physical activity, again, is another major piece of our routine. So it includes anything that you can think of, whether it be just moving, walking, dancing, doing yard work. Getting regular physical activity is really important for everyone, but it's especially important for people who have diabetes and those who are at risk for diabetes. So some simple tips to think about when you're thinking about a physical activity is set a goal and make a plan. Put it in writing. This is a big piece. It's much more likely that we'll follow through with our goal and our plan if we have it put down in writing. Another piece is recording your activity. So make sure you record the activity that you do. And studies show that people who record activity are much more likely to achieve their goals as well. Also, mix up your routine. It doesn't have to be that you walk, 2 miles every day or something like that. Mix it up. Go dancing. Do yard work. Maybe instead of using a riding lawnmower, use a push mower. Any way that you can start infusing physical activity. And then find a buddy. This helps to make us accountable, because if somebody's going to meet us for a walk or a jog or something like that, they're going to be calling us and asking us where we are if we're not there to meet them. All right. Now I'm going to pass it back on to Taryn.
All right, thank you, Charlene. All right, I'm sure some of you guys have either heard of Hippocrates or seen this. Let food be thy medicine and medicine thy food. So Hippocrates was the father of medicine, and he viewed food as a very important component to health, and he viewed it as equal to that of medicine. So what that is saying is that we can have a part to play in creating healthier communities, just like what the CDC said. So how can that be our goal for a healthier America? Could you even envision yourself as a food pantry doctor giving out healthy prescriptions? So imagine how powerful of a role that you can have in your setting. We do want to be clear that neither harvesters nor pantries are qualified to tell people what they can or cannot eat. We are not going to be giving any medical advice. We are simply offering awareness and education in a welcoming environment for people to be able to choose foods that will help them. We want to encourage healthy eating, but we're not going to mandate it. We believe that everyone should have access to a variety of options, just like what we have when we're shopping at the grocery store. We are not prohibiting items, but certainly encouraging and sharing healthy ideas. For example, if you've only ever had fried okra and didn't know how else to prepare it, or haven't ever liked any other preparation, you might not know what is out there. There are very many tasty, healthy vegetables that many people have never tried, or they've never tried in a healthy preparation. So this can be a risk-free opportunity to turn them on to new ideas and maybe even win them over to some yummy vegetables. So Harvesters is getting more and more produce, and we can help clients know how to use it. Later in this year, there will be another webinar and training about nudges, and we did talk about this a little bit at the agency conference, so that'll be a good opportunity if you want to listen in or have others from your site listen in about how you can nudge clients to healthier foods and options, and through cooking demonstrations, through recipes, through a variety of means. So some of the ideas that we're going to share here are a lot bigger. They require a lot more effort, and some are smaller. Some are very tiny, and some, again, are a little bit more infrastructure related. So we're going to share some ideas of what can be done at some settings. So here are some ideas if you are at a food pantry on how to be intentional helping your guests who have diabetes or prediabetes. So one idea is to have nurses come out to provide blood sugar or A1C testing on site, and that's something that we can potentially help with, and I know that some agencies are already doing that. Another idea is to set aside a shelf at your pantry to be low or no sugar or low or no carbs, and that's specifically with your shelf-stable foods, so that those individuals who do have diabetes or are pre-diabetic can get those and they're not going to other people. If you are offering pre-packed bags or if you are shopping on behalf of clients, there's two examples on the right, and I know it's hard to see because they're tiny, but we will be sending some of these resources out afterwards so that they could be just one example of something that you could do at your site. But what you could do, or what your volunteers could do, is ask if guests have diabetes, and then we can train you or we can help you learn how to shop for them. So on the top right, the one that's kind of behind, there's just a simple shopping list, but at the top, it does say, if you would like to let us know any dietary needs, we'd be happy to shop according to what we have that matches what you mark. So they could mark if they're diabetic, or they could mark if they're hypertensive, or you could put other options up there so that that volunteer who's shopping on behalf of them could be looking for certain things. We also, at the bottom, the list that's kind of in front, we have a diabetic friendly shopping list so that individuals can just get this list, the individuals themselves or the volunteers who are shopping on their behalf, and shop from that. And it's all set up according to my plate. Another option is getting to know your population better. And I know every pantry does this very differently. So getting to understand them, if you don't already, to better understand their dietary needs. And sometimes this is because of health reasons. Sometimes it's because of religious reasons. So can you help hand out certain things like and I'll send you this link later, we're going to have a diabetes risk test on the ADA website. So maybe you could just offer you could offer a computer setup at your pantry to do that, or you could actually hand out the paper. So those are some ideas. The next slide talks about some more. These are all around procuring healthy food items from harvesters or your community. So just additional ways, if you're not already doing all of these, and there might be others that we did not write here, just new ways to get healthy food into your site. So making sure that you're getting all your opportunities to order fresh produce from Harvester's menu, picking up more produce from Harvester's shopping floor, and I know that not everybody picks up, but we can talk about what that looks like as far as the shopping floor. Joining the Milk to My Plate program, which we just launched to everybody in the past year. Enrolling your guests in SNAP with the SNAP Outreach Department's help, and effectively what that does is it gives the clients a chance to shop at their own grocery store for things that maybe you aren't able to procure. You could certainly hold a food drive for your agency, and you could ask for very specific items like low sugar items, even potentially some fresh items which require a lot more logistics, but we can help you with those kinds of things. You could ask for monetary donations if you have certain people who frequently donate, and then you could purchase these items at wholesale or through Harvester's co-op program. There's an opportunity to grow a garden on your site, or to increase the amount of non-starchy vegetables that you grow. So really intentionally focus on some of those things that would be helpful for those with prediabetes or diabetes. An alternative to that is to work with local growers so that you don't have to grow it on site, but you could make sure that they're growing it for you and they're getting it to you. Another option is potentially lowering the limits on those sugary items in your pantry. So depending on, again, every pantry does it so differently, but if you already have certain limits on how much cereal they can have, maybe you start to separate the sugary items from the less sugary items, and the less sugary cereals, maybe they could take 2, whereas the sugary items, they can only take 1. So just working out those limits at your pantry if that's how you operate. Again, I just want to reemphasize that diabetes is very, very, very complex. So really quickly, even if you do have diabetes or if you are familiar with somebody who has it, it is not the same for everyone. So please do not offer health advice. We're asking them to consult a dietitian or their physician. We are just here to provide items at our site that can help people manage this disease. So I know that that's sometimes a lot of people's hesitation is knowing how much to offer as far as advice and how much not to offer. And so we're going to focus on the things that I'm presenting here to you today rather than very specific medical advice. But those are always questions. If you have very specific questions, please do feel free to reach out to the nutrition department when that gets kind of into a gray area. So going back to more ideas on how to be intentional at the food pantry. You could set out a diabetic-friendly recipe for guests next to certain food items. So again, maybe you are trying to put out those non-starchy vegetables and people just aren't taking them. So what are ways that we can help encourage them to try the foods? You could offer a taste test with that diabetic-friendly recipe to let guests taste them, especially for items they think they don't like whole grains and some of those vegetables that might seem a little scarier. You can post diabetes brochures for clients and direct them to these services. And again, towards the end of this webinar, we will send out some resources so that you can have those available. You could recruit a dietitian to volunteer at your site to help your guests, and dietitians can be helpful in a variety of ways. If you're at a kitchen, there's going to be a lot of the same ideas that apply as we just talked about as far as pantries. The main thing that we would encourage everybody to do is to make it a fun, delicious, and engaging experience. Ask for suggestions. You do not have to be the expert. If somebody has diabetes and they have a good recipe, they can help share that. So it doesn't have to be you being the complete expert on everything. But the more that people are involved in the process, the more they're going to have that buy-in. So again, if you have staff or volunteers or guests with diabetes, we want them to share their experiences, but we want to be cautious about them sharing any advice and very specific information. But if you're making it a fun, engaging environment instead of something that's a little bit people hesitate, it's going to be more successful. So another idea is working with a dietitian. And again, there's different things they can do at a pantry setting than they could do at a kitchen, but I know there are definitely some kitchens out there that already work with that dietitian to prepare some of those diabetic-friendly menus or meals for you so that when you have those foods, you can prepare them. Let's talk about back snack. If anybody is on the call that has back snack, or if you guys do back snack as well. So we definitely work hard to purchase healthy items for our back snack bags. So some things that we intentionally work on are things like dried fruit instead of fruit snacks, fruit leather instead of fruit roll-ups. We do not offer any juices. We have low sugar canned peaches. We have whole wheat crackers. There's a variety of things that we intentionally try to work on to be healthier. So we're doing a lot of that work on your behalf. So here's some resources. I'll talk briefly about this, but like I said, we will be sending these out afterwards, and I do want to leave a few minutes for questions. If you are on the webinar, you can go ahead and start typing any questions into the conversation box. If you're not on the webinar and you can't type in the box, then we will try and figure out a way in just a few minutes if you have questions to alert me. So some resources are, we have information on Harvester's agency page. So that's just a picture of one of the things we have on our agency page off to the right. There are lots and lots of diabetes classes out there, be it from us, from some diabetes education and empowerment programs. Both MU and K-State Extension offer these diabetes classes, and those are things that we can help you access, and those would be great things to bring to both your staff and any clients if you want to as well. ChooseMyPlate.gov has some great resources. Hy-Vee has free diabetes grocery store tour, and if you guys have never been on this, it's a fantastic resource. There are dietitians at more and more Hy-Vees all the time, and I know that's in most areas of our service area, so that's hopefully pretty accessible for a lot of people. I know not for everyone, but they will literally walk through the store with you and help you understand. Instead of picking up this fruit, just pick up this fruit instead. And so diabetes can be pretty discombobulating if you find out that you have that diagnosis. And so you're going to be changing a lot of things, and they can help break that down into small, easy, bite-sized chunks. The YMCA has a very powerful diabetes prevention program in partnership with the CDC that we'll send out more information about. Walk with a Doc. I know it's in Kansas City. I'm just learning about more places that it might be. And that's literally where you get to walk around, be it outside in a park or inside in a gym, with a doctor and ask them all your questions. So you're both getting in your physical activity and getting a lot of your questions answered. I think it's a fantastic program, and a lot of that information is off to the right-hand side. There is a website through UMKC called the KC Diabetes Connector that we would encourage you all to go to. And it's a great resource to send to your clients, and there's good resources as far as town halls that we'll talk about in a minute. It's essentially a webinar that you can join in and learn more about. And then, of course, the American Diabetes Association website. They have a lot of good information there. So they have town halls. Again, people can call in for more specific information. They have a program called My Food Advisor. They have meal planning, recipes, things like help with keeping track of your food and meals. They have a Living with Type 2 Diabetes program and booklet like you're seeing right here on the screen. They do have those risk tests that I said you could either print out and or have those available on a computer at your site for clients to fill out. And they do have brochures that you can print off as well. So they have quite a variety of things. I would definitely encourage you guys to go to the ADA website. Here are just a couple of things they have there. So here's a couple of agencies, and I know that this is definitely not all-inclusive. But I wanted to share that we have over 600 some agencies within our network, and it's hard to know what everybody's doing. And so I know that there are a lot of you who don't know what other agencies are doing. So LULAC Senior Center out in Topeka Center, they have a program called Healthy Bodies, Healthy Lives, and Healthy Minds. That program has occupational therapists, nutrition classes, nursing students from Baker University who offer health screenings. They garden on site, so they're very, very intentional about health and nutrition on site. Episcopal Community Services over in Kansas City, Kansas. I know that they provide healthy breakfast, focusing on My Plate and the 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 Fitastic message. If you're in the KC metro area, you might have heard of that. They do provide also health screenings during their lunch on site. I am not familiar right now, and I know we have somebody from ECS on the call. I'm not familiar with how often they provide those screenings, but that's a fantastic tool that they offer. And then the Samuel Rogers Health Center in Kansas City, Missouri. This year, we're partnering with them on a diabetes initiative in which when clients come in and they do have diabetes, we're getting together the physicians as well as a physical activity component as well as us so that people are getting frequent and regular A1C testing. With that, they receive a diabetic-friendly box from us, and I believe they get a physical activity component, I believe, from the YMCA. So we're all trying to work together to speak the same language and reinforce each other. So those are just some. Again, I know there's a lot more going on out there in the network, but those are just some examples of some cool things happening among our agencies. So today, we're focusing on the Q&A now. Today is a lot more generic. We did that intentionally because, as you can see, we've already flown through our hour. We did not get into a lot of the details, but we're hoping that maybe webinars or other ways would be good ways to kind of reach out to you. So this is a new venue for us. So we're going to be sending some of these talking points that we discussed here. Also some things that might help any of your volunteers or staff who are hesitant to talk with any of your guests, some things that might be safe to kind of talk about without getting too detailed. If you would like a more in-depth training, please let us know. We can work on creating another webinar or a different venue that might make sense. We could certainly also host a call where people just talk about what they're doing at their sites, if that would be helpful. I do think the ADA website would be great for a lot more in-depth, specific information about diabetes because we really touched on things very, very, very high level today. And those could be very perfect fits for your needs. So do you have any questions at this point? If so, you can type it into the conversation box. And if you do not have questions, I am going to ask that at least for everybody who has access to the webinar in the screen, please do go to the conversation box and just again type your name and agency number. So that's what you order with. If you don't know your agency number because you're not the person who orders, that is fine. Just tell us the name of the agency that you are with. We want to make sure and give you credit for attending today and giving us your time. I see some answers. Thanks for those. And we just want to also leave you with this little tagline: the opposite of hungry isn't full, it's healthy. We want to try and do what we can to help our clients get back on their feet and try to help them be as healthy as possible.
If we are on the telephone, how can we let you know that?
Just like you're doing it.
Okay.
Go ahead and ask your question.
This is Jeannie Wells, and I'm from MLM in the Northland.
Okay.
And I found this whole thing very, very, I can't wait for more.
Awesome.
Thank
That's
you.
very exciting. Yeah, totally. And if you have, again, specific requests, we're going to be sending out a survey to understand. As you saw, we had a few technical difficulties, but we're learning as we go. And so if you have suggestions on, even times when we host these webinars, as well as other webinar topics, or if you need more in depth, etc., that's where we're going to glean that information in that survey right afterwards. Feel free to use this webinar, not just for yourself, but after we post it to our website. You can use it for training for any other staff and volunteers as they come in. A lot of this work requires people to have a general working knowledge of what this is like, and then, feeling comfortable with helping clients with those kinds of things. So I appreciate your feedback. Well, if nobody has specific questions, that's totally fine. I can stop my recording.